Have you ever walked into a room full of people and felt your heart racing, palms sweating, words caught in your throat? Have you ever had a brilliant idea but couldn't articulate it clearly enough for others to understand? Or perhaps you've watched someone command a room with their words while you wondered, why can't I do that? Here's the truth that nobody tells you. The most successful people in the world aren't necessarily the smartest, the most talented, or even the hardest working. They're the ones who can communicate their ideas with confidence and clarity. They're the ones who've mastered the art of human connection through words. Think about it for a moment. Every relationship you have, every opportunity you pursue, every dream you want to achieve requires one fundamental skill. Communication. It's the bridge between your thoughts and the world, between your potential and your success, between isolation and meaningful connection. But here's the remarkable news. Communication isn't a talent you're born with. It's not reserved for the naturally charismatic or the extroverted. It's a skill, a craft that can be learned, practiced, and mastered by anyone willing to invest the time and effort. Today, I'm going to take you on a transformative journey through the essential skills of communication. We're diving deep into the principles that separate forgettable speakers from unforgettable communicators. This isn't about superficial tips or quick tricks. This is about fundamentally changing how you connect with the world around you. Over the next sections, we'll explore 10 critical areas that will revolutionize your communication abilities. From building unshakable confidence to mastering the subtle art of body language, from crafting compelling messages to navigating difficult conversations with grace, we're covering everything you need to become the communicator you've always wanted to be. But here's my request to you. If you find even one insight in this content valuable, if even one principle resonates with you or could change how you approach communication, I want you to do two things. First, hit that like button. It might seem like a small gesture, but it sends a powerful signal to the algorithm that this content matters, that these skills matter, and it helps this message reach others who need it just as much as you do. Second, subscribe to this channel because this is just the beginning of a comprehensive journey into personal development and mastery. Think of that like button as your way of saying, yes, these skills matter. Yes, others need to see this too. It's how we build a community of people committed to growth, to excellence, to becoming better communicators and ultimately better versions of ourselves. Now, let's begin this transformation together. Chapter 1. The Foundation of Confidence. Understanding your communication. Power. Confidence in communication isn't about being loud, dominating conversations, or never feeling nervous. It's about possessing a deep, unshakable belief in the value of what you have to say and your right to be heard. This chapter explores the psychological foundations that transform hesitant speakers into compelling communicators. Let's start with a fundamental truth that changes everything. Every single person you admire for their communication skills once stood exactly where you are now. They felt the same doubts, experienced the same anxiety, and questioned their abilities just as you might be doing right now. The difference isn't in their starting point, but in their decision to move forward despite the fear. Understanding confidence begins with recognizing what it actually is. Many people confuse confidence with extroversion, with being naturally outgoing or socially energized. This is a critical misconception that holds countless people back. Confidence is not a personality trait. It's a skill built through understanding, preparation, and deliberate practice. Some of the most powerful communicators in history have been introverts who learned to channel their natural tendencies toward depth and reflection into their communication style. The first pillar of communication confidence is self-awareness. Before you can effectively communicate with others, you must understand your own communication patterns, strengths, and areas for growth. This requires honest self-reflection. Think about your recent conversations. When do you feel most articulate and confident? When do you struggle? What patterns emerge? Perhaps you're brilliant in one-on-one conversations, but freeze in group settings. Maybe you excel in written communication, but stumble over spoken words. Or perhaps you're wonderful at explaining complex ideas, but struggle with small talk. These patterns aren't judgments of your worth. They're simply data points that help you understand your current communication landscape. Once you understand where you stand, you can chart a course toward where you want to go. This self-awareness extends to understanding your triggers, those specific situations or contexts that heighten your anxiety or diminish your confidence. For some, it's speaking to authority figures. For others, it's presenting to large groups or engaging in confrontational discussions. The second pillar is preparation. Confidence doesn't emerge from positive thinking alone. It's built on a foundation of solid preparation. When you thoroughly understand your subject matter, when you've anticipated potential questions, when you've practiced your delivery, confidence naturally follows. This doesn't mean memorizing scripts word for word, which actually undermines natural communication. Instead, it means deeply understanding your core message, organizing your thoughts logically, and practicing enough that the content becomes second nature. Think of preparation as building a safety net beneath your communication. Even if you stumble or lose your place, your preparation ensures you can recover gracefully. This safety net paradoxically allows you to be more spontaneous and natural because you're not constantly worried about forgetting important points or being caught off guard. The third pillar is reframing your relationship with fear and nervousness. Here's something that might surprise you. The physical sensations of nervousness and excitement are virtually identical. Your racing heart, heightened alertness, and increased energy can be interpreted either as debilitating anxiety or as energizing excitement. The difference lies entirely in your interpretation. When you feel those familiar butterflies before a presentation or important conversation, practice reframing them. Instead of thinking, "I'm so nervous I'm going to mess this up," try, "My body is getting me ready to perform. This energy will make me more dynamic and engaging." This isn't merely positive thinking. It's based on solid psychological research about how our interpretations of physical states influence our performance. When you view nervousness as preparation rather than panic, you transform that energy into fuel for better communication rather than an obstacle to overcome. The fourth pillar involves shifting your focus from yourself to your audience. One of the primary sources of communication anxiety is excessive self-focus. We worry about how we look, how we sound, whether we're making mistakes, what people are thinking about us. This inward focus creates a feedback loop that amplifies anxiety and actually diminishes our communication effectiveness. The antidote is radical audience focus. Instead of worrying about your performance, focus intensely on serving your audience. What do they need to understand? How can you make this content valuable for them? What questions might they have? When your primary concern shifts from "how am I doing" to "how can I help them," something remarkable happens. Your anxiety diminishes because you're no longer the center of attention in your own mind. Your effectiveness increases because you're genuinely connecting with your audience's needs rather than performing for their approval. The fifth pillar is embracing imperfection. Perfectionism is one of the greatest enemies of effective communication. The pursuit of flawless delivery creates enormous pressure that actually increases errors and reduces natural fluidity. Here's a liberating truth. Your audience doesn't expect perfection. In fact, minor imperfections often make you more relatable and trustworthy. When you stumble over a word and laugh it off, when you lose your place and transparently regroup, you demonstrate humanity that actually strengthens connection. This doesn't mean you should be sloppy or unprepared. It means you should strive for excellence while accepting that perfection is neither achievable nor desirable. Building confidence also requires understanding the role of body language in how you feel. There's fascinating research on what's called embodied cognition, the idea that our physical posture and movement influence our mental and emotional states. When you stand tall, maintain open body language, and breathe deeply, you don't just look more confident, you actually begin to feel more confident. Your body sends signals to your brain that you're in control, that you're safe, that you're capable. This creates a positive feedback loop where confident body language produces confident feelings, which reinforce confident behavior. Practice this right now. Sit or stand up straight. Roll your shoulders back, lift your chin slightly, take a deep breath that fills your entire torso. Notice how this physical shift changes your mental state. This isn't superficial. It's a powerful tool you can use before any important communication to shift your internal state toward confidence. Chapter 2. The Art of Clarity. Making your message. Crystal clear. Clarity is the cornerstone of effective communication. You might have the most brilliant insights, the most valuable information, or the most important message, but if your audience can't understand you, none of it matters. This chapter explores the principles and techniques that transform muddled messages into crystal clear communication. The first principle of clear communication is understanding that clarity begins in your own mind before it ever reaches your words. You cannot clearly express what you don't clearly understand yourself. This seems obvious, yet it's violated constantly. People attempt to explain concepts they have only partially grasped, share information they haven't fully processed, or advocate for positions they haven't thoroughly thought through. The result is inevitably confusing communication. Before any important communication, invest time in clarifying your own thinking. What exactly are you trying to convey? What's your core message? If you had to distill your entire communication into a single sentence, what would it be? This exercise of radical simplification forces you to identify the essential heart of your message. Everything else in your communication should support, illustrate, or elaborate on this core idea. The second principle involves understanding your audience's starting point. Clarity isn't absolute. It's relative to your audience's knowledge, experience, and context. Something perfectly clear to an expert might be completely opaque to a novice, and vice versa. Before crafting your message, you need to assess where your audience is. What do they already know about this topic? What assumptions can you make about their background knowledge? What terms or concepts will they find familiar versus unfamiliar? This audience assessment allows you to calibrate your language, examples, and level of detail appropriately. When speaking to experts, you can use technical terminology and assume foundational knowledge. When addressing a general audience, you need to build from basics, define terms, and avoid jargon. The clearest communicators develop this sensitivity to audience knowledge and adjust their communication accordingly. The third principle is structural organization. Clear communication has a logical structure that guides your audience through your message. The human mind struggles to process information presented randomly or chaotically. We need structure, patterns, and organization to make sense of complex information. The simplest and often most effective structure is chronological, presenting information in the order events occurred. This works beautifully for narratives, processes, and historical explanations. Another powerful structure is problem solution. Clearly defining a problem, then presenting your solution. This creates natural tension and resolution that engages audiences. The hierarchical structure presents a main idea supported by subpoints, each of which might have its own supporting details. This is excellent for persuasive communication or when explaining complex systems. The comparison structure examines similarities and differences between two or more things, ideal for helping audiences understand new concepts by relating them to familiar ones. Whatever structure you choose, make it explicit to your audience. Signal your organization with clear transitions. First, let's examine. Next, we'll explore. Finally, we'll consider. These structural signposts help your audience follow your thinking and anticipate what's coming next. The fourth principle involves the strategic use of examples and analogies. Abstract concepts become clear when grounded in concrete examples. Unfamiliar ideas become accessible when compared to familiar ones. The most effective communicators develop a rich repertoire of examples, stories, and analogies that illuminate their messages. When choosing examples, seek those that resonate with your specific audience's experiences. A farming analogy might be perfect for a rural audience, but fall flat with city dwellers. A technology comparison might engage younger audiences but confuse older ones. Effective examples have several characteristics. They are specific rather than vague, using concrete details that create mental images. They're relevant, clearly connecting to the point you're illustrating. They're proportionate, neither so brief they're unhelpful nor so extended they overshadow your main message. And they're varied, approaching your topic from multiple angles to reach different learning styles and perspectives. The fifth principle is precision in language. Every word you choose either enhances or diminishes clarity. Vague language creates confusion. Precise language creates understanding. Consider the difference between "we should improve our customer service" and "we should respond to customer emails within 4 hours and resolve complaints within 48 hours. The second statement is actionable because it's specific. Precision doesn't mean using complex or technical language. Often, the clearest communication uses simple, everyday words arranged precisely. Watch for common clarity killers in your language. Jargon, those specialized terms specific to a field or group, can be useful shorthand among insiders, but creates barriers for outsiders. When you must use technical terms, define them clearly the first time. Abstractions, those concepts that can't be directly observed or experienced, should be grounded with concrete examples. Passive voice often obscures who's doing what, and "mistakes were made" is less clear than "I made mistakes." Unnecessary complexity, using complicated words or convoluted sentence structures, when simpler alternatives exist, creates barriers rather than bridges to understanding. The sixth principle involves the power of repetition and reinforcement. Clarity often requires saying important things more than once, but in varied ways. This isn't redundancy, it's strategic reinforcement. When you introduce a key concept, explain it, then illustrate it with an example, then restate it in different words, then show its application. This varied repetition helps your message penetrate different learning styles and ensures critical information isn't missed. The seventh principle is knowing what to include and, equally important, what to exclude. One of the greatest threats to clarity is information overload. When you pack too much into your communication, your core message gets buried in details. Not every fact you know, every piece of research you've conducted, or every tangent you find interesting belongs in your communication. Ruthlessly edit for relevance. Does this information directly support your core message? Does it help your audience understand or act on your key point? If not, it probably doesn't belong, no matter how interesting it might be. This editing extends to the level of individual sentences. Clear writing and speaking use concise sentences that make single, clear points. Compare, due to the fact that we are experiencing a significant shortfall in our quarterly revenue projections, it has become necessary for us to implement a comprehensive review of our expenditure patterns with, because revenue is below projections, we need to review our spending. The second version conveys the same information with dramatically improved clarity. The eighth principle involves visual communication when appropriate. Sometimes words alone, no matter how somehow clear, can't match the clarity of visual representation. Complex processes, statistical relationships, organizational structures, and spatial relationships often become instantly clear with simple diagrams, charts, or illustrations. This doesn't mean every communication needs PowerPoint slides or elaborate graphics, but consider whether a simple sketch, a basic chart, or a visual metaphor might clarify what words alone struggle to convey. The ninth principle is checking for understanding rather than assuming it. Many communicators deliver their message and assume if they've been clear, they've been understood. But clarity is ultimately measured by the receiver, not the sender. Build in mechanisms to verify understanding. In conversations, pause and ask, "Does that make sense?" Or, "What questions do you have about this?" Watch for non-verbal cues that suggest confusion, furrowed brows, blank stares, or lack of engagement. In written communication, explicitly invite questions or feedback. Create opportunities for your audience to paraphrase their understanding back to you, revealing any gaps or misconceptions. The 10th principle involves developing clarity through practice and feedback. Becoming a clear communicator requires deliberately practicing clarity and seeking honest feedback about when you've succeeded or failed. Record yourself explaining concepts and listen critically. Are you as clear as you could be? Where do you lose focus or coherence? Ask trusted colleagues or friends to tell you when they don't understand you. This feedback, while sometimes uncomfortable, is invaluable for developing clearer communication. Finally, remember that clarity is an act of respect for your audience. When you communicate clearly, you're saying, "Your time and attention are valuable. I've worked to make this easy to understand." When you communicate unclearly, you're shifting the burden of understanding from yourself to your audience. Clear communication requires more effort from the speaker and less from the listener. Unclear communication is the reverse. Choose to do the hard work of clarity as a gift to those you're communicating with.
الفصل الثالث: بناء الثقة بالنفس عند التحدث أمام الجمهور. الخوف من التحدث أمام الجمهور هو واحد من أكثر المخاوف شيوعاً بين البشر، حتى أن بعض الدراسات أظهرت أن كثيراً من الناس يخافون من الخطابة أكثر من خوفهم من الموت نفسه. هذا الخوف ليس ضعفاً أو عيباً فيك، بل هو رد فعل طبيعي تطور عبر ملايين السنين من التطور البشري. في الماضي البعيد، عندما كان أسلافنا يعيشون في قبائل صغيرة محدودة العدد، أن تكون مركز الانتباه كان يعني إما أنك القائد المحترم الذي يستحق التقدير، أو أنك المتهم المهدد بالطرد من القبيلة أو حتى بالعقاب الجسدي. لذا أدمغتنا ما زالت تربط بشكل تلقائي وغريزي بين كوننا مركز انتباه مجموعة كبيرة من الناس وبين وجود خطر محتمل يهدد سلامتنا الاجتماعية أو حتى الجسدية. الخطوة الأولى الحقيقية في التغلب على هذا الخوف المزعج هي فهم طبيعته وقبوله كجزء من التجربة الإنسانية الطبيعية. لا تحاول قمع الخوف أو التظاهر بأنه غير موجود أو أنك فوق هذا الشعور. بدلاً من ذلك، اعترف به بصراحة وتقبله كصديق قديم جاء ليحذرك. قل لنفسك بصوت مسموع أو في حديثك الداخلي: أنا أشعر بالتوتر والقلق الآن، وهذا طبيعي تماماً ومقبول. كل المتحدثين العظماء الذين نراهم اليوم بثقتهم الكبيرة مروا بنفس هذا الشعور الصعب في بداياتهم، وكثير منهم ما زالوا يشعرون ببعض التوتر والقلق حتى الآن قبل كل خطاب مهم. هذا الاعتراف البسيط والصادق مع النفس يخفف الكثير من الضغط النفسي الذي نضعه على أنفسنا، ويحولنا من موقف المقاومة المرهقة إلى موقف القبول الواعي. التحضير الجيد والشامل هو أفضل علاج فعال للتوتر والقلق عند التحدث أمام الجمهور. عندما تكون متأكداً من معرفتك العميقة بموضوعك وتكون قد حضرت بشكل دقيق ومنظم لعرضك التقديمي، تقل بشكل كبير احتمالية شعورك بالقلق الشديد المشلل. ابدأ التحضير مبكراً قدر الإمكان. لا تؤجل الأمر لليلة السابقة للحدث حيث سيكون التوتر في أعلى مستوياته. ابحث في موضوعك بعمق واستفاضة. اجمع معلومات ومراجع أكثر بكثير مما ستحتاج فعلياً في العرض، لأن هذه المعرفة الإضافية تمنحك شعوراً بالأمان والاستعداد لأي سؤال قد يطرح عليك. رتب أفكارك الرئيسية والفرعية في تسلسل منطقي واضح يسهل على الجمهور متابعته، وتأكد من أن كل نقطة تقودك بشكل طبيعي إلى النقطة التالية. عندما تشعر بأنك تمتلك المادة العلمية بشكل كامل، تبدأ ثقتك بالنفس في النمو تدريجياً. تخيل أنك تشرح موضوعاً تعرفه جيداً لصديق مقرب في جلسة ودية. ستجد أن الكلمات تتدفق بسهولة وبدون تكلف. نفس هذا الشعور يمكن أن يحدث عندما تتحدث أمام جمهور، بشرط أن تكون واثقاً من معرفتك. المعرفة العميقة تولد الثقة، والثقة تولد الأداء الجيد، والأداء الجيد يعزز الثقة في دورة إيجابية متصاعدة. التدريب المتكرر هو السر الذي يحول المبتدئين الخائفين إلى متحدثين واثقين ومتمكنين. لا يكفي أن تقرأ المادة في ذهنك بصمت أو أن تراجع النقاط الرئيسية بشكل سريع. يجب أن تتدرب على إلقاء العرض بصوت عال، تماماً كما ستفعل في اليوم الفعلي. قف أمام مرآة وراقب لغة جسدك. انتبه لحركات يديك وتعبيرات وجهك ووضعية جسمك. هل تبدو واثقاً ومنفتحاً أم أنك منكمش ومتوتر؟ سجل نفسك بالفيديو إن أمكن، فمشاهدة نفسك من الخارج تعطيك رؤية قيمة جداً عن كيف يراك الآخرون. قد تكتشف عادات لم تكن تدركها، مثل قول آه أو بشكل متكرر، أو العبث بقلم في يدك، أو النظر إلى الأرض بدلاً من الجمهور. اطلب من صديق موثوق أو فرد من العائلة أن يستمع إلى تدريبك ويعطيك ملاحظات صادقة وبناءة. اختر شخصاً لن يتردد في قول الحقيقة لك بلطف، وليس شخصاً سيجاملك فقط ليجعلك تشعر بتحسن زائف. اسأله أسئلة محددة. هل كانت رسالتي واضحة؟ هل كان صوتي مسموعاً بشكل كاف؟ هل بدوت واثقاً؟ أين كانت النقاط التي ترددت فيها أو بدا فيها التوتر واضحاً؟ استمع للملاحظات بعقل منفتح. لا تدافع عن نفسك أو تبرر، بل اشكره على صراحته، واستخدم هذه المعلومات لتحسين أدائك في التدريب التالي. كلما تدربت أكثر، زادت راحتك مع المادة ومع فكرة الوقوف أمام جمهور. الممارسة تجعل الأمر مألوفاً، والمألوف أقل إثارة للخوف. حاول أن تتدرب في نفس المكان الذي ستلقي فيه الخطاب إن أمكن. لأن الألفة مع البيئة المحيطة تقلل من التوتر. إذا لم يكن ذلك ممكناً، تخيل المكان بتفاصيله وأنت تتدرب. تخيل عدد الحضور وترتيب المقاعد ومكان وقوفك وكل التفاصيل الصغيرة التي يمكنك معرفتها مسبقاً. إدارة القلق الجسدي لا تقل أهمية عن التحضير الذهني. عندما تشعر بالخوف، يستجيب جسمك بإفراز هرمونات التوتر مثل الأدرينالين والكورتيزول. هذه الهرمونات تزيد من سرعة ضربات القلب وتجعل التنفس سريعاً وسطحياً، وتسبب جفاف الفم وترتعاش اليدين، وقد تشعر بغثيان خفيف في المعدة. كل هذه الأعراض الجسدية الطبيعية يمكن أن تزيد من توترك وتجعلك تشعر بأنك تفقد السيطرة. الخبر الجيد هو أن هناك تقنيات بسيطة وفعالة للسيطرة على هذه الاستجابات الجسدية. التنفس العميق والبطيء هو أداة قوية جدا ومتاحة لك في أي وقت. عندما تتنفس بعمق وبطء، ترسل رسالة إلى جهازك العصبي بأن كل شيء تحت السيطرة وأنه لا يوجد خطر حقيقي. جرب هذا التمرين البسيط. خذ نفساً عميقاً من أنفك ببطء حتى تعد إلى 4. احبس النفس لثانيتين، ثم أخرجه من فمك ببطء حتى تعد إلى 6. كرر هذا التمرين 5 أو 10 مرات قبل صعودك إلى المنصة، وستلاحظ أن معدل ضربات قلبك يبدأ في الانخفاض تدريجياً، وأن شعور الهدوء يبدأ في الانتشار في جسمك. الاسترخاء العضلي التدريجي تقنية أخرى مفيدة جداً. تعتمد هذه التقنية على شد مجموعات العضلات المختلفة في جسمك ثم إرخائها بشكل متعمد. ابدأ من قدميك. شدد عضلات قدميك بقوة ل5 ثوان، ثم أرخها تماماً ولاحظ الفرق بين الشد والاسترخاء. انتقل إلى عضلات الساقين، ثم البطن، ثم الصدر، ثم اليدين، ثم الكتفين والرقبة، وأخيراً عضلات الوجه. هذا التمرين الذي لا يستغرق أكثر من 10 دقائق يساعد جسمك على الاسترخاء الكامل ويقلل من التوتر العضلي الذي يرافق القلق. الوصول مبكراً إلى مكان الحدث يمنحك وقتاً للتأقلم مع البيئة والشعور بمزيد من الراحة. عندما تصل متأخراً ومستعجلاً، يزداد توترك بشكل كبير، لكن عندما تصل قبل الموعد ب20 أو 30 دقيقة، تستطيع أن تتجول في المكان، تتفقد المعدات التقنية مثل الميكروفون وجهاز العرض، تتأكد من أن كل شيء يعمل بشكل صحيح، وتألف نفسك مع المساحة. امش على المنصة، قف في المكان الذي ستقف فيه، انظر إلى المقاعد الفارغة وتخيلها ممتلئة بوجوه ودودة ومهتمة. هذا التمرين التخيلي يقلل من الصدمة التي قد تشعر بها عندما ترى الجمهور الفعلي. إعادة صياغة القلق كحماس طريقة ذكية جداً لتحويل الطاقة السلبية إلى طاقة إيجابية. الحقيقة المثيرة هي أن أعراض القلق والحماس متشابهة جداً على المستوى الجسدي. كلاهما يسبب تسارع القلب وزيادة اليقظة والطاقة. الفرق الوحيد هو في كيفية تفسيرنا لهذه الأحاسيس في أذهاننا. بدلاً من أن تقول لنفسك أنا خائف ومتوتر، قل أنا متحمس ومستعد. هذا التحول البسيط في اللغة الداخلية يمكن أن يغير تجربتك بشكل جذري. جسمك يشعر بنفس الأحاسيس، لكن عقلك يفسرها الآن كإشارات إيجابية للحماس والاستعداد، بدلاً من إشارات سلبية للخطر والخوف. تذكر دائماً أن الجمهور في صفك وليس ضدك. معظم الناس الذين أتوا لسماعك يريدون فعلاً أن تنجح، يريدون أن يتعلموا شيئاً مفيداً أو أن يستمتعوا أو أن يستفيدوا من كلامك. لا أحد جاء على أمل أن يراك تفشل أو تتعثر. عندما تدرك أن الجمهور حلفاء وليسوا أعداء، يخف توترك بشكل ملحوظ. انظر إليهم كأصدقاء جاءوا ليستمعوا لقصة مثيرة تريد أن تشاركها معهم، وليس كقضاة جاءوا ليحكموا عليك ويدينوك. ابدأ خطابك بقوة وثقة حتى لو كنت لا تشعر بذلك تماما في داخلك. الثواني 30 الأولى من خطابك هي الأهم، لأنها تحدد الانطباع الأول الذي سيكونه الجمهور عنك. قف بثبات، انظر إلى الجمهور مباشرة، ابتسم ابتسامة حقيقية إن كان الموضوع يسمح بذلك، وابدأ بصوت واضح وقوي. حتى لو كانت ركبتاك ترتعشان ويداك متعرقتان، احرص على أن تبدو واثقا في الخارج. هناك مقولة شهيرة تقول: تظاهر بالثقة حتى تشعر بها فعلا، وهي مقولة صحيحة علميا. عندما تتصرف بثقة حتى لو كنت خائفا، يبدأ جسمك وعقلك تدريجيا في تصديق هذه الثقة والشعور بها حقيقة. استخدم الافتتاحية الجذابة التي تأسر انتباه الجمهور من اللحظة الأولى. يمكنك أن تبدأ بسؤال مثير للتفكير، أو بإحصائية صادمة، أو بقصة شخصية مؤثرة، أو بعبارة استفزازية تثير الفضول. عندما ترى اهتمام الجمهور وانتباههم الكامل لك منذ البداية، تزداد ثقتك بنفسك بشكل كبير. النجاح يولد النجاح، والثقة تولد المزيد من الثقة. تقبل احتمالية الأخطاء الصغيرة كجزء طبيعي من التجربة. لا أحد كامل، وحتى أعظم المتحدثين في العالم يرتكبون أخطاء صغيرة من حين لآخر. قد تنسى كلمة، أو تتعثر في جملة، أو تخطئ في نطق اسم ما. هذه الأخطاء الصغيرة ليست نهاية العالم، والجمهور عادة لا يلاحظها أو لا يهتم بها بقدر ما تتخيل. إذا حدث خطأ، لا تتوقف وتعتذر بشكل مبالغ فيه أو تلفت الانتباه إليه. ببساطة، صحح الأمر بسرعة وبشكل طبيعي، واستمر في حديثك. معظم الجمهور لن يلاحظ حتى أن شيئا حدث. في الواقع، الأخطاء الصغيرة قد تجعلك تبدو أكثر إنسانية وقابلية للتواصل. الكمال المطلق يمكن أن يخلق حاجزا بينك وبين الجمهور، يجعلك تبدو بعيدا ومختلفا عنهم. بينما عندما يرون أنك إنسان عادي يمكن أن يخطئ، يشعرون بقرب أكبر منك ويتعاطفون معك أكثر. لذا لا تخف من أن تكون بشريا وحقيقيا، فهذا في الواقع ميزة وليس عيبا. التواصل البصري مع الجمهور على مدار خطابك يبني جسرا من الثقة والتواصل الحقيقي. لا تثبت نظرك على نقطة واحدة، أو تقرأ من ملاحظاتك طوال الوقت. بدلاً من ذلك، حرك نظرك بين مختلف أجزاء الجمهور، وركز على أفراد محددين لثانية أو ثانيتين قبل الانتقال إلى شخص آخر. هذا يجعل كل فرد في الجمهور يشعر بأنك تتحدث إليه شخصياً، وليس إلى جمهور مجهول وغامض. ابحث عن الوجوه المبتسمة أو المتفاعلة وركز عليها أكثر، فهي ستمنحك طاقة إيجابية وتعزز من ثقتك. بعد انتهاء خطابك، احتفل بإنجازك مهما كان تقييمك الشخصي لأدائك. الوقوف أمام جمهور والتحدث بحد ذاته إنجاز كبير يستحق التقدير. راجع ما حدث بموضوعية. اكتب النقاط التي نجحت فيها والنقاط التي تحتاج إلى تحسين. لا تكن قاسياً على نفسك أو تركز فقط على الأخطاء. تذكر أيضاً اللحظات الجيدة، الأجزاء التي سارت بسلاسة، ردود الفعل الإيجابية من الجمهور. هذا التقييم المتوازن يساعدك على التعلم والنمو دون أن تدمر ثقتك بنفسك.
Chapter 4: Mastering Nonverbal Communication, the Silent Language. Words carry only a fraction of your communication's total meaning. Research suggests that in emotional or relational communication, over 60% of your message comes through nonverbal channels. Your body language, facial expressions, tone of voice, and physical presence. This chapter explores how to align your nonverbal communication with your verbal message to create powerful, authentic communication. Understanding nonverbal communication begins with recognizing its primacy in human interaction. Evolutionarily, nonverbal communication predates language. Our ancestors read threat, safety, dominance, and affiliation through physical signals long before complex language developed. This ancient system remains deeply embedded in how we process communication. When verbal and nonverbal messages conflict, people almost always believe the nonverbal message. If you say, "I'm interested in what you're saying," while checking your phone and avoiding eye contact, your audience believes the nonverbal message, "You're not interested." This creates both challenge and opportunity. The challenge is that you cannot not communicate nonverbally. Even when you're silent, your body is broadcasting messages. The opportunity is that by becoming conscious of your nonverbal communication, you gain access to a powerful channel for enhancing your message and building connection. Let's explore the major dimensions of nonverbal communication, starting with facial expressions. Your face is the primary canvas for emotional expression. Humans can produce thousands of distinct facial expressions, and we're remarkably skilled at reading them, often detecting emotions in fractions of a second. The most universal facial expressions, happiness, sadness, anger, fear, disgust, and surprise, are recognized across cultures, suggesting they're hardwired into our biology. Effective communicators develop awareness of their facial expressions and ensure they align with their message. If you're delivering serious news with a slight smile, even an unconscious one, your message gets muddled. If you're trying to appear confident while your face shows fear or uncertainty, your words lose credibility. This doesn't mean maintaining a frozen mask or fake expressions. It means developing enough awareness to notice when your face might be sending unintended signals. Practice facial awareness by occasionally checking your expression during conversations. What is your face doing right now? Does it match what you're trying to communicate? Video recording yourself during presentations or conversations, while initially uncomfortable, provides invaluable feedback about your facial expressions and how others perceive you. Eye contact deserves special attention as a powerful nonverbal tool. In most Western cultures, appropriate eye contact signals confidence, honesty, and engagement. Avoiding eye contact can suggest discomfort, dishonesty, or disinterest. However, eye contact norms vary significantly across cultures. In some cultures, direct eye contact with the authority of figures or elders is considered disrespectful. Understanding your cultural context is essential. Even within cultures that value eye contact, there's an art to doing it well. Constant, unbroken staring feels aggressive or weird. Looking away entirely suggests disengagement. The sweet spot is making eye contact for a few seconds, looking away briefly, then returning your gaze. This natural rhythm communicates engagement without intensity. When speaking to groups, distribute your eye contact across the audience, rather than fixating on one person or never making individual contact. This includes everyone and creates connection with the whole group. Body posture communicates volumes about your confidence, energy, and attitude. Open postures, arms uncrossed, body oriented toward your conversation partner, upright but relaxed stance, communicate confidence and openness. Closed postures, crossed arms, turned away body, hunched or collapsed stance, communicate defensiveness, discomfort, or disengagement. Again, this varies by culture and context, but in general, expanding your physical presence communicates confidence, while contracting it communicates the opposite. The way you use space also communicates non-verbally. Each culture has norms about appropriate physical distance in various types of interactions. In North America, intimate distance is about 0 to 18 inches, reserved for close relationships. Personal distance, about 18 inches to 4 feet, is appropriate for friendly conversation. Social distance, 4 to 12 feet, is typical for professional interactions. Public distance beyond 12 feet is for formal presentations or addressing groups. Violating these distance norms creates discomfort. Standing too close invades personal space and creates anxiety. Standing too far suggests coldness or discomfort. Effective communicators develop sensitivity to these spatial dynamics and adjust their distance based on the relationship and context. Watch how your conversation partner responds to your proximity. If they step back, you're probably too close. If they lean in, you might be too far. Your gestures, the movements of your hands and arms, can significantly enhance your communication or distract from it. Purposeful gestures that illustrate or emphasize your points make your communication more dynamic and memorable. Gestures help your audience visualize concepts, follow your structure, and maintain engagement. They also help you as a speaker by providing physical release for nervous energy and creating natural rhythm in your delivery. However, ineffective gestures, repetitive motions, excessive movement, or gestures unrelated to your content become distractions that undermine your message. The key is ensuring your gestures arise naturally from your content and energy rather than being manufactured or nervous habits. Practice speaking about topics you're passionate about and notice what gestures emerge naturally. Those authentic movements are the foundation for developing effective gestural communication. Tone of voice carries enormous emotional and relational information. The same words delivered in different tones convey completely different messages. That's interesting said with genuine enthusiasm means something entirely different from the same words delivered in a flat, sarcastic tone. Your tone communicates your attitude, your emotion, and your relationship with both your content and your audience. Several vocal dimensions contribute to tone. Pitch, the highness or lowness of your voice, tends to rise with excitement or anxiety and drop with sadness or seriousness. Volume communicates energy and confidence when appropriate to the setting, though excessive volume can signal aggression. Pace, how quickly or slowly you speak, affects how easily your audience can process information and conveys your emotional state. Emphasis, which words you stress, directs your audience's attention to what matters most. Developing vocal variety, variation in pitch, volume, pace, and emphasis makes your communication more engaging and helps prevent your audience from tuning out. Monotone delivery, where these elements stay constant, is one of the fastest ways to lose an audience's attention. Practice reading the same sentence with different emotional tones to expand your vocal range. Record yourself speaking and listen for places where you could add vocal variety to enhance your message. Silence and pausing, while technically the absence of verbal communication, function as powerful nonverbal tools. Strategic pauses give your audience time to process important information, create emphasis by surrounding key points with silence, and demonstrate your confidence and control. Speakers who never pause often come across as nervous or uncomfortable with silence. Those who use pauses well appear confident and thoughtful. Your overall appearance and presentation also communicate non-verbally. Clothing choices, grooming and accessories all send messages about how you want to be perceived and what you think about the occasion and your audience. Dressing significantly more formally or casually than your audience can create barriers. Appearing disheveled or unkempt can undermine your credibility, regardless of the quality of your content. This doesn't mean you need expensive clothes or to follow fashion trends. It means being intentional about how your appearance aligns with or conflicts with your communication goals. Chapter 5. Crafting Compelling Messages, the Architecture of Influence. Every word you speak, every message you craft is an opportunity to inform, inspire, or influence. But most communication fails to achieve its potential because it lacks intentional structure and strategic design. This chapter explores how to architect your messages so they capture attention, resonate deeply, and motivate action. We're diving into the principles that separate forgettable communication from messages that stick in people's minds and hearts long after the conversation ends. The foundation of compelling communication is understanding that your message must compete for attention in an overwhelmingly noisy world. Every person you speak with is simultaneously juggling dozens of concerns, distractions, and competing priorities. Your message isn't just competing with other communications they're receiving, it's competing with their worries about upcoming deadlines, their memories of recent conversations, their plans for later today, and the constant stream of thoughts flowing through their consciousness. This isn't a criticism of your audience. It's simply the reality of human attention in the modern world. Given this reality, compelling messages must do something extraordinary in their opening moments. They must immediately signal that paying attention will be worthwhile. This happens through what communication experts call the hook, an opening that creates curiosity, relevance, or emotional resonance. A strong hook might be a surprising statistic that challenges assumptions, a brief story that illustrates the stakes of what you're discussing, a provocative question that engages the listener's thinking, or a bold statement that demands attention. Consider the difference between opening a presentation with, "Today I'm going to talk about our quarterly sales figures," versus, "Last quarter, we discovered something that challenges everything we thought we knew about our customers." The first is bland and predictable. The second creates immediate curiosity. What did they discover? How does it challenge assumptions? The listener's mind engages automatically because the hook has created an information gap that demands to be filled. This principle of creating curiosity through strategic information gaps is fundamental to compelling communication. Once you've captured attention, your message needs clear organization that guides your audience through your thinking. Human minds crave structure and pattern. When information arrives in random order without clear connections, our brains struggle to process and retain it. When information follows a logical, clear structure, comprehension and retention improve dramatically. The structure you choose should match your purpose and content. For persuasive messages, the problem-solution structure works beautifully because it creates tension and then resolves it, satisfying the mind's desire for closure. Let me walk you through how this works in practice. You begin by vividly describing a problem your audience cares about, making them feel its weight and consequences. You might share specific examples that make the problem concrete and relatable rather than abstract. You help your audience understand why this problem matters and what's at stake if it remains unsolved. Only after you've established the problem thoroughly do you introduce your solution. The contrast between the problem's weight and the solution's promise creates natural persuasive power. For explanatory or educational messages, building from simple foundations to complex ideas works exceptionally well. You start with concepts your audience already understands, then layer new information onto that foundation. Each new concept builds logically on what came before, creating a staircase of understanding rather than asking your audience to make impossible leaps. This scaffolded approach respects your audience's current knowledge while expanding it systematically. Narrative structure, organizing your message as a story, leverages the human brain's natural affinity for stories. For hundreds of thousands of years before written language or formal education, humans transmitted knowledge through stories. Our minds are literally wired to engage with narrative. When you structure information as a story with characters, conflict, and resolution, you're working with rather than against how human cognition naturally operates. Even technical or business information can often be framed narratively by focusing on the people involved, the challenges they faced, and how situations unfolded over time. Within whatever structure you choose, the principle of strategic repetition enhances retention and impact. This doesn't mean saying the exact same thing over and over, which quickly becomes tedious. It means circling back to your core message multiple times from different angles and in different forms. You might state your main point directly, then illustrate it with a story, then explain it with an analogy, then demonstrate it with data, then restate it in a memorable phrase. Each repetition reinforces the message while the variation maintains interest. The language you choose profoundly impacts your message's effectiveness. Concrete, specific language creates vivid mental images and clear understanding. Abstract, vague language requires more cognitive effort to process and tends to be quickly forgotten. Compare "we need to improve customer satisfaction" with "we need to reduce average response time to customer emails from 24 hours to 4 hours." The second creates a clear mental picture of what improvement actually means. Whenever possible, trade abstract concepts for concrete specifics. Don't say soon when you can say by Friday. Don't say significant increase when you can say doubled. Don't say various stakeholders when you can name specific people or groups. Sensory language, words that evoke sight, sound, touch, taste, or smell, makes messages more memorable and emotionally engaging. When you describe a proposal as rough around the edges, rather than imperfect, you're engaging tactile imagery that makes the message stickier. When you describe a problem as creating a bottleneck rather than slowing progress, you're using visual imagery that helps people understand spatial relationships. Our brains process sensory information more deeply than abstract concepts, so sensory language creates stronger neural encoding and better retention. The emotional dimension of your message deserves careful attention because humans are emotional beings who make most decisions based on feelings, then justify them with logic. This doesn't mean manipulating emotions irresponsibly. It means recognizing that purely rational appeals often fail to motivate because they don't engage the emotional systems that drive human behavior. Effective messages create appropriate emotional resonance by connecting to values your audience cares about, describing outcomes that matter to them personally, and acknowledging the human dimensions of whatever you're discussing. You can create emotional connection through several techniques. Personal stories, especially your own experiences of vulnerability, struggle, growth, create powerful emotional bridges. When you share how you personally struggled with something your audience is facing, you're not just conveying information, but creating empathy and connection. Vivid descriptions that help people imagine scenarios activate emotional responses. If you want people to care about a safety issue, don't just cite statistics. Help them imagine the human consequences in specific sensory detail. Contrast and comparison create clarity and impact by highlighting differences. The human brain is essentially a difference detection machine, constantly scanning for what's changed or what stands out against the background. You can leverage this by explicitly contrasting options, approaches, or timeframes. Before this change, we spent 3 hours on this process. After, it takes 15 minutes. The stark contrast makes the improvement immediately clear and impressive. Most companies in our industry operate this way. We've chosen a fundamentally different approach. The contrast clarifies your unique position. Questions embedded within your message engage your audience's active thinking rather than passive reception. When you pose a question, even rhetorically, your audience's mind automatically begins formulating an answer. This mental engagement keeps them involved with your message rather than drifting away. Strategic questions also guide thinking in productive directions and help audiences arrive at conclusions themselves, which is far more persuasive than simply telling them what to think. The rhythm and pacing of your message affect both comprehension and engagement. Varying your sentence length creates a pleasing rhythm that maintains interest. Short sentences create punch and emphasis, especially for important points. Longer sentences allow for nuance and the exploration of complex ideas. When all your sentences are roughly the same length, the resulting monotony lulls audiences into disengagement. Conscious variation in pace, sometimes speeding up to create energy and sometimes slowing down for emphasis or complexity, keeps your audience actively engaged. Analogies and metaphors are powerful tools for making unfamiliar concepts accessible by connecting them to familiar experiences. When you compare a computer's CPU to a brain, data storage to a library, or network bandwidth to a highway, you're giving people who might not understand technical concepts a framework for comprehension based on things they already know. The key to effective analogies is choosing comparisons that genuinely illuminate rather than confuse, that your specific audience will find familiar and apt. Evidence and support for your claims build credibility and persuasiveness, but not all evidence is equally effective. Statistics can be powerful when they're truly surprising or when they're made relatable through comparison. We served 10,000 customers last year is less impactful than we served enough customers to fill a small stadium, because the second creates a visual image. Expert testimony carries weight when the expert is credible to your specific audience. Personal anecdotes and case studies make abstract principles concrete and relatable. The conclusion of your message deserves as much care as the opening, because it's often what people remember most clearly. A strong conclusion doesn't just summarize what you've said. It provides closure by circling back to where you started, now with new understanding. It crystallizes your main message in a memorable phrase or image. It points toward action or future implications, giving your audience a sense of what comes next. It might end with a story that encapsulates your message or a call to action that translates understanding into behavior. Chapter 7. Handling difficult conversations, navigating conflict with grace. Every relationship, whether personal or professional, eventually faces moments of tension, disagreement, or conflict. The quality of your communication during these challenging moments often determines whether relationships strengthen through adversity or fracture under pressure. This chapter explores the principles and practices that allow you to navigate difficult conversations with skill, maintaining dignity and respect while addressing issues that matter. Understanding what makes conversations difficult is the essential starting point. Difficulty rarely stems from the topic itself, but from the emotions, stakes, and relational dynamics surrounding it. A conversation about budget cuts becomes difficult, not because numbers are inherently emotional, but because people fear losing their jobs or feel their contributions are undervalued. A discussion about differing political views becomes heated, not because ideas themselves are threatening, but because people tie their identities to their beliefs and perceive disagreement as personal rejection. Recognizing this distinction helps you address the actual source of difficulty rather than just the surface topic. Most difficult conversations involve at least one of three elements that trigger our defensive responses and make productive dialogue challenging. First, there are conversations where something important is at stake, where the outcome genuinely matters to one or both parties. These high-stakes situations activate our stress responses, making it harder to think clearly and communicate effectively. Second, there are conversations involving strong emotions like anger, fear, hurt, or shame. These emotions can overwhelm our rational faculties and drive reactive rather than thoughtful responses. Third, there are conversations that threaten our sense of identity or competence, where we feel criticized, misunderstood, or attacked. These identity threats trigger particularly strong defensive reactions because they touch on our fundamental sense of who we are. The foundational principle for navigating difficult conversations is entering them with the right mindset and intention. Many people approach challenging conversations as battles to be won, where success means convincing the other person they're wrong or getting your way. This adversarial mindset almost guarantees poor outcomes because it creates defensiveness and escalation rather than understanding and resolution. A more productive mindset frames difficult conversations as problems to be solved collaboratively rather than contests to be won. This shift transforms the other person from an opponent to a partner in finding solutions that work for everyone involved. Preparation dramatically improves your effectiveness in difficult conversations. This doesn't mean scripting every word, which creates rigidity that prevents genuine dialogue. It means clarifying your own thinking before entering the conversation. What exactly is the issue you need to address? What outcome are you hoping for? What's negotiable and what's non-negotiable for you? What might the other person's perspective be? What emotions might arise and how will you manage them? What common ground exists that you can build on? This thoughtful preparation creates mental clarity that allows you to navigate the conversation more skillfully when emotions run high. Beginning difficult conversations well sets the tone for everything that follows. Opening with accusations or criticism immediately triggers defensiveness that makes productive dialogue nearly impossible. Compare starting with "You never listen to anyone's input" versus "I'd like to talk about how we make decisions as a team because I have some concerns." The first creates instant defensiveness. The second opens space for dialogue. Effective openings often acknowledge the difficulty of the conversation itself, demonstrating that you understand this isn't easy for either party. They state your positive intention, clarifying that you want to solve problems rather than assign blame. They invite collaboration rather than demanding compliance. Managing your own emotions during difficult conversations requires both awareness and skill. Strong emotions aren't wrong or bad, but they can hijack productive communication if they were not managed consciously. When you feel anger rising, fear tightening your chest, or hurt threatening tears, you face a choice. You can let these emotions drive your communication, usually resulting in reactions you later regret. Or you can acknowledge the emotions while maintaining enough space from them to choose your response deliberately. This doesn't mean suppressing or denying feelings. It means creating enough pause between feeling and response to act from your values rather than your immediate emotional impulses. Practical techniques for managing emotions in the moment include taking slow, deep breaths to activate your parasympathetic nervous system and counteract the stress response. Silently naming your emotion to yourself creates psychological distance from it, allowing you to observe the feeling rather than being completely consumed by it. Taking a brief pause before responding gives your prefrontal cortex time to engage, allowing for more thoughtful responses. If emotions become truly overwhelming, requesting a brief break to collect yourself demonstrates maturity rather than weakness, and often prevents escalation that damages relationships permanently. Listening becomes even more critical in difficult conversations than in normal dialogue. When tensions run high, people's natural tendency is to stop genuinely listening and instead focus entirely on defending their position or planning their rebuttal. This creates parallel monologues rather than actual dialogue, with both parties talking past each other without genuine engagement. Committing to truly understand the other person's perspective, even when you disagree strongly, changes the entire dynamic of difficult conversations. This doesn't mean you must agree with their view. It means you first seek to understand it fully before responding. Asking questions rather than making statements often de-escalates tension while promoting understanding. Questions communicate curiosity rather than judgment, inviting explanation rather than demanding defense. When someone says something you find troubling or confusing, responding with, "Help me understand what you mean by that," or "What's making you see it that way?" opens dialogue rather than shutting it down. These questions demonstrate respect for the other person's perspective while gathering information that helps you respond more effectively. They also sometimes help the other person clarify their own thinking, occasionally leading them to modify positions as they articulate and examine their reasoning. Acknowledging valid points in the other person's perspective, even when you disagree overall, builds credibility and reduces defensiveness. People are far more willing to consider your perspective when they feel their own has been genuinely heard and respected. This acknowledgement doesn't require you to abandon your position. It simply recognizes areas of validity in theirs. You might say something like, "I understand your concern about the timeline, and you are absolutely right that rushing could compromise quality. At the same time, we're facing external deadlines we can't control, so we need to find a way to balance quality with timeliness." Using I statements rather than you accusations significantly reduces defensiveness in difficult conversations. Compare, "You're always late to meetings and it's disrespectful," with, "I feel frustrated when meetings start late because it affects my schedule for the rest of the day." The first feels like an attack that triggers defensive justification. Chapter 8. The Art of Persuasion, Influencing with Integrity. Persuasion is often misunderstood as manipulation or coercion, as if influencing others requires tricks, deception, or overpowering their will. But genuine persuasion is actually something far more elegant and ethical. It's the art of helping people see possibilities they hadn't considered, understand information in new ways, and make decisions that genuinely serve their interests while aligning with yours. This chapter explores how to become persuasive in ways that honor both your integrity and the autonomy of those you're seeking to influence. The foundation of ethical persuasion is understanding that you're not trying to make people do something against their will or better judgment. Instead, you're helping them see how a particular course of action serves their own values, needs, or goals. This distinction is crucial because it shifts persuasion from a manipulative exercise to a collaborative process of mutual benefit. When you're genuinely persuasive, people don't feel pushed or pressured. They feel helped toward clarity about what's actually best for them. Credibility forms the bedrock upon which all persuasive communication rests. Before people will be influenced by your ideas, they must first trust you as a source of reliable information and good judgment. Credibility has several components that work together to create trust. First, there's competence, the perception that you actually know what you're talking about, that you have relevant expertise, experience, or knowledge. Second, there's trustworthiness, the belief that you're honest and will represent information accurately rather than distorting it to serve your agenda. Third, there's goodwill, the sense that you genuinely care about the other person's welfare rather than simply using them to achieve your own goals. You build competence credibility by demonstrating deep knowledge of your subject, citing credible sources and evidence, acknowledging the limits of your expertise honestly, and showing that you've thoroughly considered the issue from multiple angles. You build trustworthiness by being scrupulously honest even when it doesn't serve your immediate interests, acknowledging weaknesses in your own position, fairly representing opposing viewpoints, and maintaining consistency between your words and actions over time. You build goodwill by genuinely considering the other person's needs and concerns, adapting your proposals to address their interests, and demonstrating through your behavior that you value the relationship beyond any single transaction or decision. Understanding your audience is absolutely fundamental to persuasive communication. What persuades one person or the group might leave another completely unmoved, because people are motivated by different values, respond to different types of evidence, and make decisions through different processes. Before attempting to persuade anyone, Invest time in understanding what they care about, what concerns or fears might make them resistant to your proposal, what decision-making criteria they typically use, and what communication style resonates with them. This understanding allows you to frame your message in terms that naturally connect with their existing motivations rather than trying to impose your own framework on them. The most persuasive communicators recognize that people are rarely convinced by pure logic alone. Human decision-making is fundamentally emotional, with logic serving primarily to justify decisions that emotions have already made. This doesn't mean abandoning rational arguments. It means understanding that emotional resonance and logical soundness must work together for maximum persuasive impact. You need to make people feel something about your proposal while simultaneously giving them rational reasons they can use to justify the decision to themselves and others. Creating emotional resonance happens through several powerful techniques. Storytelling engages emotions in ways that abstract arguments never can. When you share a concrete story about a specific person facing a real challenge that your proposal addresses, you create empathy and emotional investment that statistics alone cannot generate. Vivid language that helps people imagine outcomes engages their emotional systems. Instead of saying a new process will improve efficiency, help them picture what their workday will actually look like with those improvements, how it will feel to leave work on time instead of staying late, what they'll be able to accomplish with the time and energy they save. Connecting your proposal to values your audience already holds creates powerful persuasive leverage. People want to act consistently with their self-concept and stated values. When you show how your proposal aligns with values they have already committed to, you're working with rather than against their existing motivational structure. If someone values innovation, frame your proposal in terms of how it represents innovative thinking. If they value tradition and stability, frame the same proposal in terms of how it preserves core values while adapting to changed circumstances. This isn't dishonesty if both framings are genuinely true. It's strategic emphasis that connects with what already matters to your specific audience. The principle of reciprocity, deeply embedded in human psychology, creates persuasive power when used ethically. When someone does something for us, we feel a natural obligation to reciprocate. You can activate this principle by genuinely helping others, providing value without immediate expectation of return, and building a pattern of generosity that creates goodwill. When you later need to persuade someone you've helped, they're naturally more inclined to listen and cooperate. The key is that this must be genuine and long-term rather than transactional and manipulative. You help people because it's right and because you value relationships, not just to create obligations you can later exploit. Social proof, our tendency to look to others' behavior when making decisions, can be used persuasively and ethically. When you can honestly say that others similar to your audience have already adopted your proposal and benefited from it, you reduce perceived risk and increase confidence in the decision. People naturally think if others like them have made this choice successfully, it's probably safe and beneficial for them too. This is why testimonials, case studies, and examples of successful adoption are so persuasive. The ethical boundary is ensuring that the social proof you cite is genuine and representative rather than cherry-picked or fabricated. The way you sequence your arguments affects persuasive impact through what psychologists call primacy and recency effects. People tend to remember best what they hear first and what they hear last in any sequence. This suggests placing your strongest arguments at the beginning and end of your persuasive communication, with supporting points in the middle. However, this must be balanced against the need to build understanding progressively. Sometimes you need to lay groundwork with background information before your strongest arguments will make sense or land with full impact. Addressing objections proactively rather than ignoring or minimizing them actually increases persuasiveness by demonstrating intellectual honesty and thoroughness. When you acknowledge potential concerns and address them directly, you accomplish several things simultaneously. You show you've thought carefully about the issue from multiple angles. You demonstrate respect for your audience's intelligence and likely concerns. You prevent objections from festering unexpressed while undermining your credibility. And you often diffuse objections by addressing them before they've fully formed in people's minds. The way you address objections matters enormously. Dismissing concerns as unimportant or foolish triggers defensiveness and resistance. Acknowledging the validity of concerns while explaining why your proposal still makes sense on balance shows respect and nuanced thinking. Sometimes the most persuasive response to an objection is acknowledging, It represents a real trade-off, being honest about the downsides of your proposal while explaining why the benefits outweigh the costs. This honesty paradoxically increases rather than decreases persuasiveness because it demonstrates trustworthiness and helps people make genuinely informed decisions. Creating a sense of appropriate urgency can be persuasive when done honestly. People tend toward inertia, maintaining the status quo even when change would benefit them, because change requires effort and involves uncertainty. Highlighting genuine costs of inaction or real deadlines for decisions can overcome this inertia without resorting to artificial pressure or manufactured scarcity. The ethical line is ensuring that the urgency you create is real rather than fabricated, that you're highlighting genuine consequences rather than inventing fake deadlines or false scarcity to pressure people into hasty decisions. The contrast principle affects how people evaluate options and can be used persuasively. When you present options in sequence, each is judged partly in contrast to what came before. If you first present a clearly inadequate option, your preferred option looks better by comparison than it would in isolation. If you first present your proposal before introducing its costs, the costs seem more acceptable than if you led with them. This principle can be used ethically to help people see genuine value, or it can be abused to manipulate perception. The ethical boundary is whether you're helping people see real value more clearly or distorting their perception to serve your interests at their expense. Involving people in the process of developing solutions dramatically increases their commitment to implementing those solutions. When people feel ownership over a decision because they participated in shaping it, they're far more motivated to make it work than when solutions are imposed on them. This means the most persuasive approach is often not presenting a fully formed proposal, but instead involving others in collaborative problem-solving, where you guide the process toward outcomes you believe are best while genuinely incorporating their input and concerns. The solution you arrive at together may differ from what you initially envisioned, but it will have far stronger buy-in and commitment. Framing how you describe the same factual situation profoundly affects persuasiveness. Describing a medical treatment as having a 90% survival rate is more persuasive than describing it as having a 10% mortality rate, even though these statements are mathematically identical. Describing a policy as preventing losses is more persuasive to some people than describing it as achieving gains, even when the actual outcomes are the same. Understanding how framing works allows you to present your ideas in ways that naturally resonate with how people think and make decisions. The ethical question is whether your framing illuminates genuine value or obscures important information. The language of choice versus obligation affects persuasiveness in subtle but powerful ways. When you present your proposal as something people can choose rather than must do, you respect their autonomy and reduce resistance. Instead of saying someone needs to adopt your approach, ask what they think about trying it. Instead of presenting a single option, offer choices that all move in the direction you're advocating, while giving people genuine agency in selecting their path. People support what they freely choose far more enthusiastically than what they feel forced to accept. Persistence balanced with respect is crucial for persuasion. Many worthwhile proposals aren't accepted immediately, but require sustained patient advocacy over time. People need time to process new ideas, overcome initial resistance, and build confidence in unfamiliar approaches. Giving up after one rejection often means abandoning ideas that would have eventually succeeded. However, persistence must be balanced with respect for clearly stated boundaries. There's a difference between respectfully revisiting an idea when circumstances have changed, or new information has emerged, versus badgering people who've clearly said no. Learning to read this difference is essential for persuasive communication that builds rather than damages relationships. Finally, remember that the most sustainably persuasive approach is genuinely helping people make decisions that serve their real interests. Short-term persuasive wins achieved through manipulation, pressure, or deception create long-term credibility losses that undermine future persuasive attempts. When people discover they were manipulated into decisions that didn't actually serve them, they become resistant to future influence and warn others against trusting you. Conversely, when people consistently find that following your counsel serves them well, they become increasingly open to your influence over time. Your most powerful persuasive tool is a track record of genuinely helping people make good decisions. Chapter 9. Adapting your communication style. Flexibility for maximum impact. One of the most critical yet often overlooked skills in effective communication is the ability to adapt your style to different people, situations, and contexts. What works brilliantly in one setting may fall completely flat in another. What resonates powerfully with one person may alienate someone else. This chapter explores the art of communication flexibility, teaching you how to read situations accurately and adjust your approach to maximize connection and an understanding across diverse circumstances. The first principle of adaptive communication is recognizing that there is no single right way to communicate. Many people develop one comfortable communication style and then apply it uniformly across all situations, wondering why they're effective sometimes, but struggle other times. The reality is that communication effectiveness is always contextual. A communication approach that works perfectly when brainstorming with creative colleagues might be completely inappropriate when presenting to senior executives. A style that builds rapport with extroverted team members might overwhelm introverts. Understanding this fundamental variability is the first step toward developing genuine adaptability. Adaptive communication begins with assessment before you ever open your mouth. When entering any communication situation, consciously evaluate several key factors that should influence your approach. First, consider your audience. Who are you communicating with? What's their level of knowledge about your topic? What are their priorities and concerns? What communication style do they typically prefer? Are you addressing one person or many? If many, how diverse are they in terms of background, expertise, and interests? Each of these factors should influence how you craft and deliver your message. Second, consider the context and purpose of the communication. Are you informing, persuading, collaborating, or building relationships? Is this a formal or informal setting? How much time is available? What constraints exist in the environment? A 5-minute elevator conversation requires radically different communication than a 2-hour workshop, even if you're discussing the same topic with the same person. Understanding the situational parameters allows you to adapt your approach to fit the container you're working within. Third, consider the relational dynamics at play. What's your relationship with the people you're communicating with? Are you peers, or does hierarchy exist? Is this a new relationship or an established one? What's the history of previous interactions? Trust and familiarity that exist in established relationships allow for communication shortcuts and informality that would be inappropriate with new contacts. Similarly, communication with peers can be more casual and collaborative than communication with those in authority positions, where additional formality and structure might be expected. One of the most important dimensions for adaptation is recognizing different personality types and communication preferences. Some people are highly analytical, wanting detailed data, logical arguments, and thorough evidence before making decisions. They appreciate precision, accuracy, and systematic thinking. When communicating with analytical personalities, lead with facts and figures, provide comprehensive information, organize your thinking clearly, and be prepared to defend your reasoning with solid evidence. Rushing them toward decisions or relying primarily on emotional appeals will likely fail because it doesn't match how they process information and make choices. Other people are more relational and emotionally oriented, making decisions based primarily on how options align with their values and affect people they care about. They appreciate warmth, personal connection, and understanding the human impact of decisions. When communicating with relational personalities, invest time in building connection before diving into business. Share stories and examples about how ideas affect real people. Acknowledge emotional dimensions of situations and demonstrate that you care about them as individuals, not just as means to your ends. A cold, purely analytical approach will feel alienating to them even if your logic is sound. Some individuals are action-oriented and results-focused, impatient with excessive discussion, and eager to make decisions and move forward. They value efficiency, directness, and practical outcomes. When communicating with action-oriented people, get to the point quickly. Focus on practical implications and concrete next steps. Provide executive summaries rather than exhaustive detail, and respect their time by being concise and outcome-focused. Long theoretical discussions or excessive process will frustrate them because it doesn't match their preference for decisive action. Still others are creative and big-picture oriented, more interested in possibilities and vision than in practical details. They enjoy brainstorming, exploring novel ideas, and thinking innovatively about future potential. When communicating with creative personalities, engage their imagination by describing compelling visions and possibilities. Give them space to ideate and contribute ideas. Focus on the big picture before diving into details, and appreciate their innovative thinking even when it's not immediately practical. Excessive focus on constraints and details can stifle their natural enthusiasm and creativity. The most adaptable communicators learn to recognize these different styles in others and flex their approach accordingly. This doesn't mean being inauthentic or fake. It means emphasizing different aspects of your message and adjusting your delivery to connect with how different people naturally think and process information. You can communicate the same core content to all 4 personality types, but you would emphasize different elements and use different approaches with each to maximize understanding and engagement. Cultural adaptation represents another critical dimension of communication flexibility. Cultural differences profoundly affect communication preferences, norms, and interpretations. Some cultures value direct, explicit communication, where meaning is conveyed primarily through words. Other cultures prefer indirect, high-context communication, where much meaning is conveyed through implication, relationships, and shared understanding rather than explicit statement. Chapter 10. Continuous Improvement: The Journey of Communication Mastery. Communication mastery is not a destination you arrive at, but a continuous journey of growth, refinement, and evolution. The principles and techniques we've explored throughout this book provide a foundation, but truly exceptional communicators understand that development never stops. This final chapter explores how to commit to ongoing improvement, how to practice deliberately, how to learn from every interaction, and how to build communication excellence into the fabric of your daily life. The first principle of continuous improvement is embracing a growth mindset specifically about your communication abilities. Many people view communication skill as a relatively fixed trait, something you either have natural talent for or you don't. This fixed mindset creates a self-fulfilling prophecy where people who believe they're not good communicators avoid situations that would develop those skills, ensuring they never improve. Conversely, viewing communication as a learnable skill that improves with practice and feedback opens the door to genuine development regardless of your starting point. A growth mindset about communication means interpreting failures and struggles differently. When a presentation goes poorly or a conversation becomes awkward, a fixed mindset interprets this as evidence of your inadequacy. A growth mindset sees the same experience as valuable feedback about what needs work and what strategies aren't yet effective. This reframing is transformative because it removes the emotional weight of failure and converts every communication experience, successful or not, into a learning opportunity that advances your development. Deliberate practice, a concept from performance psychology, distinguishes true skill development from simply repeating the same behaviors over time. You can have thousands of conversations without improving much if those conversations don't push you beyond your comfort zone or if you don't consciously work on specific skills. Deliberate practice involves identifying specific aspects of communication you want to improve, designing practice experiences that target those specific skills, executing the practice with full concentration and effort, receiving feedback on your performance, and then refining your approach based on that feedback. This might look like choosing to work specifically on asking better questions during this week's meetings. Before each meeting, you prepare thoughtful questions. During the meeting, you consciously focus on question quality rather than just letting conversation unfold naturally. After the meeting, you reflect on which questions generated useful dialogue and which fell flat. Over time, this focused practice develops questioning skills far more effectively than simply attending meetings without this intentional focus. Creating opportunities for low-stakes practice accelerates skill development by allowing you to experiment and fail without serious consequences. Many people only practice communication skills in high-stakes situations where mistakes have real costs, which creates anxiety that inhibits learning and makes people revert to safe, familiar patterns rather than trying new approaches. Deliberately creating practice opportunities where the stakes are low gives you space to stretch, experiment, and refine new skills before deploying them in situations that truly matter. This might involve volunteering to present at team meetings before you present to senior leadership, practicing difficult conversations with trusted friends before having them with colleagues, or joining organizations like Toastmasters specifically designed to provide supportive environments for developing public speaking skills. These low-stakes environments allow you to build competence and confidence progressively, rather than expecting yourself to perform perfectly in high-pressure situations without adequate preparation. Seeking and utilizing feedback is essential for continuous improvement, because we often lack accurate self-awareness about our communication patterns. You might not realize you say certain phrases repeatedly, that your body language contradicts your words, that you interrupt others frequently, or that your explanations are clearer or more confusing than you imagine. External feedback from observers provides information you simply cannot access through self-reflection alone. However, seeking feedback requires some skill itself. Generic requests like asking someone if your presentation was good typically generate polite but unhelpful responses. Specific requests yield useful information. Ask observers to watch for particular behaviors like eye contact, vocal variety, or how you handle questions. Request feedback about specific moments, like how your opening landed or whether your main point was clear. Create psychological safety for honest feedback by responding to criticism with gratitude rather than defensiveness, demonstrating that you genuinely want to improve rather than just seeking validation. Recording yourself speaking, while uncomfortable for most people initially, provides unmatched feedback about your communication patterns. Video captures not just your words, but your body language, facial expressions, and overall presence. Audio recordings reveal vocal patterns, verbal fillers, and pace that you might not notice in the moment. Watching or listening to yourself communicate is often revelatory, highlighting habits you are completely unaware of and showing you how others experience your communication. The discomfort of seeing yourself on video diminishes with exposure, and the learning value is enormous. Make it a practice to record important presentations, significant conversations when appropriate and ethical, or even just yourself explaining concepts when practicing. Review these recordings with a critical but compassionate eye, noting both strengths to leverage and areas for development. Track your progress over time by comparing recordings separated by weeks or months, celebrating improvement and identifying persistent challenges that need continued attention. Learning from master communicators accelerates your development by exposing you to excellence you can study and emulate. Identify communicators you admire, whether they're professional speakers, colleagues, public figures, or teachers. Watch them carefully, analyzing not just what they say, but how they say it. What makes their communication compelling? How do they structure their messages? How do they use their voice and body? How do they connect with audiences? What techniques can you adapt to your own style? This analysis works best when it's specific rather than vague. Don't just notice that someone is a great speaker. Identify precisely what makes them effective. Perhaps they use strategic pauses masterfully, creating emphasis and giving audiences time to process. Perhaps they tell stories that make abstract concepts concrete and memorable. Perhaps they ask thought-provoking questions that engage audience thinking. Identifying specific techniques allows you to experiment with incorporating them into your own communication in ways that feel authentic to you. Reading widely about communication, both practical guides and theoretical frameworks, provides conceptual understanding that complements experiential learning. Books on specific aspects like storytelling, persuasion, conflict resolution, or cross-cultural communication deepen your expertise in particular areas. Research from fields like psychology, neuroscience, and linguistics reveals how human communication actually works, providing scientific grounding for practical techniques. Biographies of great communicators offer insights into how they developed their skills and overcame challenges. However, knowledge alone doesn't create skill. The relationship between reading about communication and becoming a better communicator is similar to the relationship between reading about exercise and becoming fit. The reading provides valuable information and motivation, but actual improvement requires putting that knowledge into practice. The most effective approach combines learning conceptual frameworks through reading with deliberate practice applying those frameworks in real communication situations. Reflecting regularly on your communication experiences transforms everyday interactions into learning opportunities. After important conversations, presentations, or meetings, invest a few minutes in structured reflection. What went well? What could have been better? What did you learn about the other person or the situation? What would you do differently next time? What do you want to remember for future similar situations? This reflection doesn't need to be elaborate or time-consuming, but making it a consistent habit gradually builds wisdom and intuition about communication. Journaling about communication experiences, while more time-intensive, provides even deeper learning benefits. Writing forces you to articulate your thinking more precisely than mental reflection alone. It creates a record you can review later to identify patterns across multiple experiences. It allows you to process not just the external events, but your internal emotional responses and the beliefs that might be limiting your effectiveness. Over time, a communication journal becomes a personal textbook of hard-won insights customized to your specific development journey. Expanding your comfort zone systematically builds communication range and confidence. Identify communication situations that make you uncomfortable, then deliberately seek out opportunities to face them in progressively challenging ways. If you're uncomfortable speaking in meetings, start by making brief comments before progressing to longer contributions and eventually to leading discussions. If you struggle with conflict, practice small disagreements before tackling major confrontations. If networking events trigger anxiety, start with small gatherings before attempting large conferences. This progressive exposure to increasingly challenging situations builds both skill and confidence. Each successful experience, even if imperfect, proves to you that you can handle situations that once seemed impossible. Over time, situations that initially felt terrifying become merely challenging, and eventually become comfortable parts of your communication repertoire. This expansion of your comfort zone doesn't happen through wishful thinking, but through consistent intentional practice that pushes your boundaries while providing enough support that you don't become overwhelmed. Building supportive relationships with others committed to communication development creates accountability and mutual learning. Find a communication partner or small group where you can practice together. Give each other feedback, share resources and insights, and encourage each other through challenges. This social support makes the development journey more enjoyable and sustainable, while providing diverse perspectives that enhance learning. Different people notice different things in your communication, offering varied feedback that individual reflection or single-source feedback cannot provide. Teaching others what you're learning about communication accelerates your own development through a phenomenon educators call the protégé effect. When you explain communication concepts to others or coach them on specific skills, you deepen your own understanding because teaching requires you to organize your knowledge clearly and answer questions that reveal gaps in your thinking. Mentoring less experienced communicators not only helps them, but forces you to articulate principles you might apply intuitively without fully understanding, making your unconscious competence more conscious and therefore more transferable and reliable. Maintaining physical and mental health provides the foundation for communication excellence. Your communication effectiveness is profoundly influenced by factors like sleep quality, physical fitness, nutrition, and stress management. When you're exhausted, your thinking becomes foggy, and your emotional regulation suffers, undermining communication quality. When you're physically energized and mentally clear, communication flows more naturally and effectively. Viewing health practices not just as personal wellness, but as professional communication development reframes their importance and can increase your commitment to them. Cultivating emotional intelligence alongside technical communication skills towards creates holistic communication excellence. All the techniques and frameworks we've explored but have become dramatically more effective when paired with genuine self-awareness, empathy, social awareness, and emotional regulation. A technically skilled communicator who lacks emotional intelligence often comes across as cold or manipulative. An emotionally intelligent communicator who lacks technical skills may connect warmly but struggle to convey complex ideas clearly. Excellence emerges from developing both dimensions together. Celebrating progress rather than fixating on perfection sustains motivation through the long journey of communication development. Improvement is rarely linear. You'll have breakthroughs and setbacks, periods of rapid growth and frustrating plateaus. Maintaining perspective about your overall trajectory rather than getting discouraged by temporary struggles helps you persist through the inevitable challenges. Regularly acknowledging how far you've come, comparing your current abilities to where you started, rather than to some imaginary ideal of perfection, builds the confidence and motivation needed for continued growth. Understanding that communication mastery is ultimately about service rather than performance transforms your relationship with skill development. You're not building communication skills to impress others or feed your ego, though confidence certainly increases as skills develop. You're building these skills to better serve others through clearer explanations, more genuine connections, more effective collaboration, and more positive influence. This service orientation keeps development grounded and purposeful, connected to values deeper than mere self-improvement. Finally, recognize that the journey of communication development is really a journey of personal growth more broadly. As you become a better communicator, you necessarily develop greater self-awareness, emotional intelligence, intellectual clarity, cultural sensitivity, and interpersonal wisdom. You learn to see situations from multiple perspectives, to manage your emotions constructively, to build genuine relationships across differences, and to influence others ethically. These capacities serve you far beyond any single conversation or presentation. They shape who you are as a person and the positive impact you have on the world around you. Committing to communication excellence is ultimately committing to becoming your best self. Conclusion: your communication journey begins now. We've traveled together through 10 essential dimensions of communication excellence, exploring everything from building foundational confidence to navigating difficult conversations, from mastering nonverbal signals to adapting flexibly across contexts. You now possess a comprehensive framework for understanding and developing communication skills that can transform your relationships, your career, and your impact in the world. But knowledge alone changes nothing. These principles and techniques become valuable only when you put them into practice. The communication skills that will truly serve you aren't the ones you read about, but the ones you deliberately develop through consistent, mindful application in real-world situations. Start today. Choose one specific skill from these chapters to focus on this week. Perhaps it's asking better questions, managing your body language more consciously, or preparing more thoroughly before important conversations. Practice that one skill intentionally until it begins to feel natural, then add another. Build your communication excellence, one skill, one conversation, one interaction at a time. Remember that everyone who communicates with exceptional skill today once stood exactly where you are now. They felt the same uncertainties, faced the same challenges, and questioned their abilities just as you might be doing. The difference between them and those who remain stuck isn't talent or innate ability, indeed. It's the decision to commit to growth and the discipline to follow through on that commitment day after day. Your voice matters. Your ideas deserve to be heard. The connections you could build, the understanding you could create, the positive influence you could have are all waiting on the other side of communication skills you can develop. The world needs what you have to offer, but only if you can communicate it effectively. Begin your journey now. The conversations that will change your life are waiting.